breakfast in the morning. And as you very rightly told us, Montek, and I will start with you, is geopolitics is one thing, and that's important, obviously, and that will make a difference. But what is it that we can do and must do? And in your view, how do you see some of these things emerging in our world? And what is it that you feel all of us need to think about and work on? Please. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think you rightly touched on geopolitics. It's important. It's changing dramatically. It's not changing in a manner that I like. It's not changing towards the direction that we all thought it would move. But the thing is, we have to make up our mind. How do we deal with that? And I think we have to deal with that by saying that, look, it's very uncertain how geopolitics will move. It'll be totally uncertain in the course of the year. So we have two choices. Either we say that until there is a geopolitical agreement and a multilateral rule, etc., we have no responsibility for doing anything. I think that would be wrong. So we have to assume that our negotiators, etc., somehow or the other, the US will recognize that there is no way other than multilateral cooperation, and slowly things will change. In the meantime, what do we do? Now, I think that we have to get out of let me step back. I think we have to create credibility that we internally are capable of taking the sorts of difficult decisions which the rest of the world doesn't seem to be capable of taking across countries. I mean, remember, we are 27 or so states. And the fact of the matter is that there are interstate issues. I was just being interviewed by someone on television, for example, on water. And, we know that climate change is going to make water availability a problem. It's already a problem. It'll become worse. It'll become worse because the intermittency of precipitation will increase. Extreme events will increase. This will mean there will be more runoff and less water will be captured. And therefore, clearly, we have to do a whole lot in order to ensure that as long as the total precipitation is the same, which is what they think, at least for the next 20, 30 years, the fact that it is much more intermittent and concentrated will not lead to excessive water runoff into the sea. That's a huge agenda that includes afforestation, this, that, and the other, treating water basins so that, we actually harvest that water. But more than that, I think we have to recognize that water has to be economized. And in my view, that goes to the rock bottom of many policies in India, which we are not raising. NGOs in particular, I think, who are very, very concerned about water, very rarely say that water should be properly priced. Now, as an economist, I mean, there are only two ways of doing it. Either you nationalize the entire water supply, including groundwater, and ration it out according to some optimum consideration, or you raise the price of water. Now, there's no reason why what we are doing is we've got caught into a populist tradition for the last 30 years, 40 years, of underpricing canal water, okay? So canal water is underpriced. So then, I mean, when I was in government, one of the well-known chief ministers of the time in the South had a huge program for lift irrigation in order to feed the canal system. And I won't mention who or which state, but many of you can guess. And I said, look, but this is not very economical because you're going to spend all this money lifting all this water. And he says, but what can I do? Because you fellows are giving water away free in the canal. And my canals cannot have water unless I use this. So it boils down to me incurring an explicit cost just to give a level playing field to my fellows compared to other farmers. So, I think the pricing of water at one extreme, if you look at a developed country example, I mean, they have the same problem and they're not handling it well. In the United States, for example, in Western US, in California, the Colorado River, etc., they're not pricing properly. Australians have the problem in the Murray-Darling Basin. They're doing pricing. So, basically you have certain water rights, and if you don't want to use all your water rights, you can sell them to someone else. Now, there are a lot of imaginative ways in which the scarcity of water is handled. But they involve either the state says this is a national resource, we are nationalizing it, and then we will ration it out. That basically means a license permit Raj for every farmer. Personally, it'll be a disaster, but that's a different issue. But if you don't want to do that, and you don't want to price water, then you will have what you are having. Basically, continuous use of water suboptimally, and not achieving what I think the Prime Minister's slogan rightly says, more crop per drop. How are you going to get more crop per drop if the price system doesn't support it and if you don't ration the water? And this is a problem not just in Punjab, in every state. Now look at the legal basis on which water can be regulated. Everybody swears by the Constitution, and so do I. The Constitution says that the control of water in a state is entirely with the state. The state can control the river that passes through it. And if it's an interstate river and there's a dispute between state A and state B, the only thing we do is to set up an arbitral tribunal, Supreme Court judges, and they give a fair reading. Frankly, if the states refuse to do that, you don't have any legal right to do it either. But in the past, states have agreed. But states have violated the arbitral award unilaterally. I mean, Punjab, for example, the Satluj-Yamuna Canal was meant to share the water between Punjab and Haryana. But politically, this became difficult, and Punjab government just abandoned the canal that was going to do the sharing. There was nothing much that we could do. So I think, what is it? How do we need to think this out? And this is a political issue. It's all right in these seminars, one can say this, but frankly, unless political parties take a view, I don't know whether political parties, what view they will take. Because today, the downstream, the lower riparian state, as it's called, is completely at the mercy of the upper riparian state. The only way it is not is because it's the center itself that approves the hydroelectric dams up there. But once the dams are there, I mean, hang on a second. Once the dams are there, imagine a situation where some of the awards that have been given in the past say that state A will release X million cubic meters of water during the period to state B. Now, this X million is not even expressed as a proportion of the water that's available. It just said X million. Now, if for some reason, because of rainfall being scarce, etc., the water dries up and there isn't that much water, then can they reduce the X million to make it the same proportion? That's not very clear. So frankly, it's a lawyer's paradise. And I don't see enough thinking on it. I don't see enough working on it, etc., etc., etc. So that's just one example. Take, for example, let me give you one other example, which is since I see a lot of women in this room, I'll test the power of economic ideas against them, against their first reaction. It is now a virtually universal policy of all parties in all states. This is not a central government issue. This is a state government issue. That women travel in buses should be made free. It's only a matter of time before the same thing is done for metro. Because after all, if women traveling in buses is made free, then it is impossible for a state government to say that that is rational, but women traveling in metros should pay. So you can take it from me that the same thing will apply. Now, if you do nothing else but just do this, then all that will happen is that the Road Transport Corporation that runs both the metro system and the buses will just go broke. Because assuming that women are maybe 40% of the travelers, and indeed over time, hopefully they'll increase. Basically, this system will go broke. They will not be able to repair the buses. Buses will break down. The system will slowly grind to a halt. Exactly the same thing will happen to the metros if this is expanded to the metros. Now, if you want to have a bias in favor of women, and I'm in favor of that, by the way, the logical thing is that women will be free and men will pay more. So that way, in every family, the men in the family will cross-subsidize the women. I mean, somebody must cross-subsidize the men. I don't see any logic of upper middle class women being cross-subsidized by the tax system, because the taxes are being paid by poorer people. But I don't see any politician, any party wanting to say that. In the absence of that, the policy they are advocating is identical to saying that I want to promise you that all your women will travel free. And 10 years later, there won't be the buses needed to meet the travel costs. And I haven't thought about that, but tell me 10 years later and we'll see it. Now, this is just economic madness, right? But we need someone like Sunita to highlight these things, because it's very easy to highlight the absurdities of Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk. But these are our own self-inflicted bits of damage. Now, I just want to ask one question before I shut up. How many women agree with what I've said? Raise your hands. Not unanimous. A lot of women don't agree. What?
I mean, clearly what we agree is that we
Okay.
don't want the bus system to
Now,
wind down.
more difficult.
Okay?
How many men agree that they should be
They should
overcharged?
overcharge. They should cross-subsidize.
One.
You started a new debate, Montek. Hold off on this. Hold off on this. It will come back. But this issue is a real issue, and I know Anumita will talk about it, because in Delhi, we have invested in electric buses, but ridership is going down. So we need to understand what is the impact of this, and we need to make sure that investment, public investment, and public mobility work. So it'll come back tomorrow, I think, is your session, Anumita, and you will talk about it.
By the
So
way,
hold that thought.
it isn't just electric buses. As a matter
It's
of
all
fact,
buses.
moreover, the real thing you need in cities is to move away from private transport to public transport.
Absolutely.
And actually, even if in the start, you just do it on ICE buses,
Yeah.
and hope to expand those buses to electric according to money, that may be sensible. The biggest thing you have to do is to get people out of the
Private
notion
cars.
that your self-respect and what your neighbors think depends on you driving out in a car. And that is, by the way, for women, closely linked to the safety in the system, which they can go from home to the metro station. And if woman is coming back at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and she doesn't feel safe, she's going to drive a car. But the honest truth is that given the numbers involved, if that many people start driving cars, we are going to be absolutely choked. And I think our automobile industry is fattening itself in the hope that car expansion is going to take place, huge amounts and so on. I mean, if you draw the Viksit Bharat projection, let's hope we get there, and we will sooner or later. Think of what that means in terms of rising prosperity. The demand for vehicles, forget whether they're electric or not, is a second order issue. The demand for vehicles is such that we just won't be able to meet them. And I compliment Sunita in her work, because she's the first person who pointed out that rich people who have cars should pay parking charges. And if you were to compute the parking charges in terms of the cost of land occupied, because when you park a car, the traffic carrying capacity of the road is correspondingly reduced. The truth of the matter is that, I've been to meetings where people have got up and said in great anger that the parking charges in markets are too high. Actually, they're too low,
Mm.
if you ask me. There's no question about it. But we have not, I mean, if you can't convince rich people who have cars and who have degrees that they should give a signal that this is a change needed, don't expect the poor to do that. And in my view, other than just sort of attending, applauding meetings, particularly in Davos, in favor of climate change, I don't think our rich are giving an example of what is actually needed. And definitely in the matter of car ownership, shifting to public transport. Look, in New York, I mean, millionaires take a tube. They don't turn up. I mean, they don't regard this as an example of their self-worth. If they don't take a tube, they take a cab. So, you know,
It's
but
like-
our chaps, I mean, getting out of a cab is a sure sign that you run into difficulties.
Put mildly.
What?
Amitabh, I'm going to move to you then, and then because I want all three of you to come in and then questions. Amitabh, you know, your experience is the most contemporary for all of us. You've seen the world from the inside now. You've seen it change as well in the last few years. Plus, you have been so involved with doing things. So you have a very interesting background, as I see, a man who both has looked at the top, but also moved the system to get things done. So from your view, how do you see the world emerging? And what do you see as some of the big issues that we need to care about and navigate? Please.
You know, so the plenty of things happening. First is that globally, I mean, that you have a war going on for over 1,000 days in the heart of Europe. So the period of stability, which was created after post-World War II, that has come to an end. And secondly is that you have a breakdown of global supply chains across the world. I mean, you have scenario where Biden administration put 100% duty on China, Europe put 45% duty, then you have 25% on Canada, Mexico. So the global supply chain is totally disrupted. And third is that you have new forces of production and productivity of artificial intelligence, quantum computing emerging, which have huge implications in terms of transforming lives of citizens. But the algorithms on which they have based also have the possibility of triggering conflict among societies. So these are the broad trends. But whatever is happening, I personally am of the view that this is a huge, huge opportunity for India because there's a vacuum. And last time there was a vacuum when Donald Trump came and walked out of the Paris Agreement. China used that opportunity and today controls 80% of people don't realize this, but they control almost 80% of the critical minerals in the world, and they also the processing. They control 78% of the EV vehicles. People talk about Tesla, but Tesla controls just 12% of the market. BYD is controlling 22% of the market now. And the latest figures, Tesla's sales in Europe have dropped by 43%. They control about 76% of the solar manufacturing. And therefore, China took that opportunity of fulfilling the vacuum which was created, and another vacuum is now being created. So to my mind, firstly, this is an opportunity. It's not a crisis, it's an opportunity for India really to accelerate the pace for clean tech manufacturing in India. And it's a huge opportunity in a range of areas. There's no reason why India should not become the champion of two-wheeler manufacturers or a three-wheeler manufacturer, supplying two-wheelers and three-wheelers to the rest of the world. Secondly, it's a huge opportunity for India to do battery manufacturing. If we do not do this, we'll become a a colony importing goods from China, and our imports in all these clean tech manufacturing will become huge, much more than what we do in terms of oil. So this is really a massive opportunity. Secondly, my view is that, on the ground level, that in India, if 42 of your cities are amongst the 50 worst polluting cities in the world, then there is a huge failure of municipal governance. I mean, it has nothing to do with finance. It has nothing to do with central government. Let's fix it right and proper. And there is no municipal governance in India today. I mean, if you drive from an elite colony like Motibag, where I stay, and drive down to the airport, both sides of the airport, you'll see plastic, paper, filth. There's no municipal governance in Delhi, but there's no municipal governance in many, many cities of India. 42 cities are the worst polluting cities. There's a total dismal failure of municipal governance, and we need to fix that right. And I'm saying it can be fixed right because cities like Indore and Surat have done it. And in India, if you don't need to keep reinventing the wheel, if Ambikapur and Indore and Surat can do it, then you just need to replicate that model in many cities of India. So you need to have continuity in municipal commissioners, mayors, whatever, for a period of 5 years and task them and get it delivered. So that's a failure of state government. That's a failure of municipal governance, to my mind. And the third point I want to make is that there is a huge failure of citizens in India. And there's a failure of citizens because where we do not even take the responsibility of segregating waste at household level. And if you do not segregate waste at the household level, and we don't become active participants in this movement, India will just become a city of garbage and filth. And therefore, the citizens must become very, very active participants in this process, and they must play a critical and significant role. And, fourthly, my view has been always that many of these things, including air pollution in Delhi, has just been a failure of governance. Because we keep blaming, biomass burning outside Delhi, but there's a lot of biomass burning taking place in and around Delhi, in the adjacent area of Delhi, where chowkidars still burn, at the peak of this crisis, burn firewood to keep themselves warm. We need to just replace all that with LPG. We need to take very firm action against industries and brick kilns, factories, all in the proximity of Delhi, and close all these pollutings. And we have not taken, there are 36 units of power plants operating in and around Delhi. We've not implemented action against them, which was to be done in 2018. So there's a lack of strong will to take action. And fourthly, bring in good cleanliness. Delhi is amongst the most filthiest cities of India today, in the heart of Delhi. And therefore, this new government must actually bring in great municipal governance in this. I entirely agree with Mr. Ahluwalia when he said that water needs to be priced, because if 17%, India is the world's 17% of population with just 4% of water, that means, first of all, you don't have water. Secondly, if 90%, latest statistics is 89% of water is being consumed by agriculture, that means rice and sugarcane is consuming all your water. And we are actually exporting virtual water in the name of basmati rice. So all the water is just being consumed by water-consuming crops. And it's also because we are not pricing water. We are not pricing, forget water, we are not even pricing electricity. And therefore, free electricity is leading to extraction of water. And therefore, to my mind, pricing of water, pricing of electricity is critical. Whether it's women and men, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got used to free doles, and Kejriwal's system of governance of giving free doles and buying out everybody. And everybody must realize that the more free doles you get, including women must realize that if you keep getting free doles, you'll make the country go bust. And that is what is happening. States after states like Himachal are going bust because of this huge policy of free doles and populism. And good governance must become good politics in India. That, to my mind, is critical. I'm a very strong believer that the failure of India is not about finance. It's a failure of good governance at all levels. That must become the hallmark of India. You know, a small city like Singapore, 750 square kilometer, 65 its per capita income was just 600 US dollars. Its latest per capita income is $90,000. It's taken it from 600 to $90,000 per capita income. That's not been done on populism. That's been done on really solid, good governance, including pricing of water. Pricing of water means those who consume less pay less, those who consume more and more and more pay a bomb. And therefore, there must be a pricing of water linked to the actual amount of consumption of water that you do. And that is critical for India.
No, absolutely. I think very good point. I mean, something that we at least have been arguing for, that we need to price the resources, and we need to make sure that we don't, because, you know, we keep saying, Amitabh, that we are in this strange political economy where the rich are subsidizing, the poor are subsidizing the rich of India. So I think that's something we need to. Raj, let me bring you into this conversation. Yes, of course, please. Be disruptive.
No, I agree with what Amitabh had said, but I just want to give yet another example, which actually, as journalists, you would find interesting. How many of you have relatives in the United States? Wow. We're really globalized, there's no question. Huh? Now, I pose you the following issue. There's a lot of concern in India, and I think Amitabh touched on that when he said that in Singapore, I mean, they have got this phenomenal stratospheric level of per capita income because they're running a very modern, very efficient city in a globalized world. Now, theoretically, there's no reason why 4 or 5 of our cities, we may not get $90,000 per capita because we have a flow of migrants that will come in, which Singapore doesn't. But we could have a comparable quality of city, providing the city dwellers pay for it. Now, most people are very upset, and very, very often I am also in Delhi, that, you know, we don't get the quality of service that a city should provide. None of them think that they're not paying nearly enough property tax. Now, I tell you, I happen to live in Panchsheel Enclave, which at one point was graded at the same level as Panchsheel Park, which is a very kind of upper level place. And our fellows lobbied, okay, no, this is not A, this should be graded B. Now, and they succeeded, by the way. So Panchsheel Enclave is now graded B. The property tax is a function of whatever the rent is, the area is, and some stated level. So other than mentioning where you live and what the area, which they know what the area is, the property tax cannot be, you cannot be fooled. You cannot fool them. But the interesting thing is that when I made a comparison asking friends of mine, you know, they said, look, how come you're living in this place and every other house has a BMW in front of it, and the one that doesn't has a Mercedes? So it's not low, it's not even a middle class locality. How come, you know, the roads are not good, etc.? So I said the fundamental reason is, and they're not aware of it, the property tax they pay is about 1/100th as a percentage of the value of property that their relatives in the United States pay. So I asked you all to raise your hands. Please ask your relatives, what is the property tax you pay as a fraction of the value of the property you live in? And just compare it with what you do in whichever city you live in. And you will see that, you know, when we say the cities run out of money to do good things, and by the way, property tax can be very easily made progressive because you just for those that are occupying maybe 300 square feet, 400 square feet, you can just make it ridiculously low. You needn't even raise it. But anything above that, I mean, it should be possible for somebody to win an election by saying that unless you pay, because you can't, state government will not give you the money.
Let me interrupt you here
Yeah, of
before I
course.
get in, Raj. Is that something that you don't live in? Amitabh still lives what I call Lutyens Delhi, not Lutyens Delhi, does not pay a property tax.
No, but that's,
Okay.
look,
No,
that's
so-
part of his salary.
Oh, so,
No,
you know,
I don't agree with it.
no, no, Montek, let's
No, I don't
just
agree.
point that the richest.
I'm in
I
favor.
take your point.
No, first of all, he's living in rented accommodation, so the property tax should be paid by the government.
Okay.
Okay.
I hope they pay
Secondly,
it.
I personally think, and I said this when I had the benefit of living in Lutyens, Delhi,
Lutyens.
whatever you like, uh, except for those political leaders who have Z category security.
Yes.
And there are some, unfortunately.
Uh.
For the rest, this whole thing of free rental or subsidized rental should be abolished, jack up their salaries and
Yes.
raise the rent. I can guarantee you that if you did that, 3/4 of the chaps would go and find private accommodation and would not be living in what you call Lutyens Delhi. So, but you must make it real. That is, what is the property tax being paid? And ask the people in Singapore. They'll also tell you. That if you're not paying, why do you expect to get any service? The logical thing is that you park your Mercedes in a street that looks like a slum and feel happy that you go from your room into your Mercedes, crossing ditches, puddles, whatever it is, because you're not paying property tax. And frankly, I think the whole business of can we get services without paying for them is the other side of the coin, that we mustn't have freebies. I mean, I agree with him that freebies are likely to bankrupt these states. That may be the best, that'll be the crisis that will lead to reforms. But one of the reforms must be that we should have a notional level. Okay, what should be the property tax as a value of property? And those who have the property should pay it, even if they've rented it out. I mean, it's a simple thing.
No, good point. Very good point. Raj, let me pull you into this. It's a very interesting, essentially what I'm hearing from both is it's a governance failure, but it's also a failure in terms of us getting many of our strategies right, where we need to make sure that we don't move the needle from one end to the other so that we move towards so much populism that we actually end up with not being able to provide services, not being able to provide the facilities, and make the poor poorer is the bottom line of this. And then in the global arena today, how do you see many of these conversations fitting in? Raj?
Well, I think doubtless the uh, geopolitics in the world has become very complex, and maybe I'd go as far as to say that its nature and content has become amoral. Nations are going to act in their interests. Nations and the political leadership is going to answer to their constituents in terms of what will please the constituents. That's what they are there for. And that's the basis of their electability or getting into government. But notwithstanding the complexities, at that arena, which you have described so articulately in your opening remarks, I think nationally we have a huge task to be done. And that also at the fundamental level, really speaking, Amitabh brought out about the waste management, the water management issues, the all kinds of, medical waste, toxic. We haven't even addressed those issues here remotely as well, maybe there is some consciousness about them, but there is really no concerted or visible effort. Uh, and of course, which is the arm of the government that can actually handle and navigate these issues, and that is the local government. The local government is, sort of exists in perhaps 10% of our cities or 15% of our cities. And in majority of the cities, it's almost non-existent. And wherever it exists, it's not able to perform for a variety of reasons. Lack of resources, there's a deficit in skills. Now, if all those things need to be corrected, we have to really go in for a structural effort to ensure that the local bodies are vested with those appropriate skills, etc., and they are empowered to actually govern. We are expecting them to govern, but they, they need to be empowered. There is a certain political relationship that exists between the state capitals and the cities, etc. And that relationship, unless it is changed and transformed, it's not going to actually help the municipalities or the municipal bodies to be able to perform. And indeed, if they get the powers, if they get the resources, if they have the skills, then a part of their responsibility is also to be able to incorporate and get the citizenship involved in the effort. Today, the citizen feels, he's entitled to service. It's not my job. If I'm even throwing waste on the streets, oh, well, somebody will clean it up. I have really no responsibility. Unless that awareness and the education is built, we are not going to be able to move forward. And there are, of course, other major issues like, the state capitals need to be decongested. Why should governments actually be concentrated in state capitals? They should move into, different districts at least, sort of let the government be visible to the common citizen that it's doing something. So there is a whole list of agendas that can be created, and for the climate and environment community, I think it is a real mile-long effort to be able to, bring that kind of consciousness and awareness amongst the different players. And I think this kind of initiative, this conversation, this dialogue is really, sort of not only important, but it also will help find pointers and directions as to what are our priorities and in which direction we should move. And perhaps this kind of conversation should be held in different states. Thank you.
I can't see Shuparno, but I think I can take the liberty, as my boss is out, to take 10 minutes, I think, of questions, and then we can break for lunch. So, Sunil, I'll start with you. Gaurav, I have you after that.
Mr. Ahluwalia and Amitabh both have raised one point. Overconsumption of... My name is Sunil Kumar. I'm a journalist, a print journalist from Chhattisgarh. I edit a daily newspaper there. So both of you have raised one point, overuse of water in crop fields and underground water being exploited at a very fast... I would like to describe my experience of Chhattisgarh. Paddy price has been increased to 3,100 per quintal. And government is purchasing almost every grain of paddy crop. At the same time, it is providing free electricity to farmers for their agricultural pumps up to 5 HP. In addition to that, now there are solar panel pump So it is underground water is being exploited like anything. Paddy, as everybody knows, it needs a lot of water. Paddy fields are like a talab, like ponds in season. That is one. Underground water is going down 50 to 100 feet per year. Now, in some areas, it is 700, 800 feet deep. It has gone down. Another thing in a colony like I live in, I see people using pressure pumps to wash their car every day, and they wash the street in front of their houses because there is no metering of water. People have tube well water. There is no metering on tube wells. There is no metering in municipal water supply. Personal water consumption is not metered at all. I visited Nagpur a few months back and I witnessed that the water requirement has gone down by 20% because they have metered water. Once you meter it, consumption goes down. It is going to be a very unpopular thing. And in the tsunami of populist measures by political parties where they are bidding against each other, it is not going to be advised. It may be good governance. It may be uh, good governance, as Amitabh has stressed, but at the same time, it won't make a good election manifesto. That is their problem. So I do not know which way this democracy is leading to, because more election manifestos, they are based on not just freebies, but also to direct delivery of cash and so many other things. So this is my observation I wanted to add. And what can be done? Why water supply should not be metered?
So, you, Montek and Amitabh, and I'll take a few more questions, but um, we have time. So no, just on this, the water supply being monitored, I think it's a very critical issue. In Delhi, we are talking about 60% losses because of lack of monitoring. So we'll come back to it. Gaurav? Yes, please. हाँ, मैं आती हूँ.
My question is a
Actually,
direct
Gaurav
one.
told me I have
I'm
enough
I'm
time.
Gaurav from
So no
West of India, sir. मैं सभी की जानकारी के लिए थोड़ा हिंदी में बात करूंगा. I'm very surprised. मुझे बहुत आश्चर्य हो रहा है कि हम environmental crisis की बात कर रहे हैं और दो इशू यहाँ पर दो मेजर इशू नहीं डिस्कस हो रहे हैं, poverty and population.
क्या चीज?
Poverty and population. So I mean, I would like you, Montek sir and Amitabh sir, to explain to each and every one of us. India is the 5th largest economy in the world, soon going to be the 3rd largest. Why is our per capita income is still less than USD 2500? और जब हम गार्बेज की बात करते हैं, लैंडफिल्स की बात करते हैं, polluted यमुना की बात करते हैं, the poor in Delhi doesn't care about landfills or the polluted Yamuna because he's so busy making his ends meet, going through the struggles of life. उनको फर्क नहीं पड़ता गार्बेज कहाँ जा रहा है, उनके पास पैसे नहीं है. आपने प्राइस की बात की, प्राइस रेज प्राइस फॉर वाटर and do not avail free transport or free power. I'm not saying that I support it, but for poor, it's a difficult choice to make. Why we are not discussing poverty and population? I have not seen any politician making any statement on population control.
So population and poverty, where do they stand in terms of the environmental crisis? Good question. Okay. Now, let me take this. Yes, you have the mic.
Yeah, I have the mic. So my question, I'll introduce. So can I
Okay.
introduce?
Ah,
Let him get free.
just let
So
them.
this is Sanjay Agarwal. So we attended one session on smart cities. Dr. Mishra was there, the director at AIMS. And recently I raised the same question to the urban development housing minister. I said, smart cities ki charcha aap log kar rahe hain. He says, nahi, wo nahi hai. That is just a, small sample we are doing. Nothing happening. So Mishra ji said that I was in Lucknow and I came to Delhi. I became director of AIMS and I'm not going back. So what ails our country is that when we become somewhere, we don't go back to our village, which even Raj sir had said that people are not, giving it to the society. So I like to live in Delhi all my life. So we are crowding the cities.
So again, a population question. What happens? Why don't you go back? Yes, I have. Yes. You from the Hindu. I'm also coming to you, Patricia. I'll come to you right after that. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
I'm Swati.
Swati.
I'm Swati from the Hindu Hyderabad. So my question is to Mr. Ahluwalia. You have taken example of freebies in free bus rides, free transport, and free power for agriculture. So in both cases, governments are supposed to compensate the energy corporations and what you call the RTC, transport corporations, which they are doing, but not sufficiently. Maybe we should ask the governments to pay, recompense sufficiently. That is one point. My second point is, why have you not taken the example of industrial consumption? Ethanol industries, for example, they consume a lot of water, but water is subsidized. States are competing with each other to offer subsidies to industries. Water is offered on subsidized prices. Do you think it is all right?
Very interesting questions. Why don't we start with these three and then I'll come to you, Patricia, right after this. So the whole population question, population and poverty question, the whole question about what about industry, but also the whole
One question, ma'am.
एक मिनट रुकिए मैं थोड़ा सा संभालने की कोशिश में
जी, जी,
बहुत
बिल्कुल।
हाथ है मैं पहले पेट्रिशिया पे आऊंगी इसके बाद फिर आपके पास आऊंगी and the other big question that is would the economics work that if instead of saying no to subsidy the state actually ended up with compensating for the subsidy that is given out, and what about industry which seems to be getting a free ride in all this? So I think I'll take anyone. I'll ask Amitabh, ask Raj.
I think Mr. Ahluwalia has been my guru. I was his very young undersecretary and deputy secretary when he was commerce secretary. So the best responses will come from him.
See, now, you have to compliment him. I gave him the mic because you would want an authoritative view of someone in government. Now he's privatized that question. You're getting a useless view of one individual, but I'm happy to answer. First, on this population thing is a middle class myth. Population, thank you very much, is being controlled. The population growth rate is going to go to 0 by 2050. Admittedly, we will have 1.6 billion people, okay? I think we should have done a better job and we should have controlled it so it didn't go to 1.6 billion. Maybe it should have been controlled to 1.4. But remember, that difference is not a huge difference if the objective is to raise the per capita income from 2,900 to 14,000, okay? So I think we worried too much. Let me just say that the population thing is not a big problem. Number two, on your point about industry, I mean, it's always good to identify different guys who are getting a freebie. It's probably true that industries are being offered water too cheaply. Where it is being offered by a state that isn't industrialized, but is desperately keen to have industry and is willing to bear the cost because it wants to start some industrial process, I mean, I would leave it to the state. The main thing with industry, if you ask me, is they must absolutely purify the water before unloading it into the natural water system. Whether you charge them more or you charge them less is a separate issue. Apart from these new things, semiconductors and so on, the biggest users of water are your power plants, okay? Now, frankly, if you want to charge them, they would say, I'm quite happy to be charged. Then they will just raise the electricity cost. And by the way, from a renewable electricity point of view, that'd be a good thing because the coal-based electricity would become cheaper. At the moment, instead of charging a carbon tax. We are giving an unnecessary subsidy to plants that need to be cooled because they're using carbon. But remember, the critical thing is absolutely no compromise on pollution. And I mean, the wastewater. And there, the biggest damage is not done by the big fellows. It's done by all the small fellows. Because they say we are too small, we can't do pollution control. So now, one possibility is that you relocate them in industrial estates where you can have common pollution treatment, et cetera, et cetera. But then that runs into all the political. I think the whole problem, frankly, is that there isn't a political will to implement the national policy. Sunita has been a big advocate. I have to compliment her on this, by the way, because most NGOs miss this point. But she has, and it's there even in this thing that we've just released, that the national pollution environment policy says the polluter must pay. And it doesn't say except if he's small scale or medium scale or whatever. Whoever you are, you must pay. And if you're running an industry, pass it on in your costs. And if that makes you uncompetitive, then either find some ways of becoming competitive or vacate the ground and let more efficient industries take over. I think we don't have a willingness to do that. Look at tanneries, for example. I mean, it'd be quite interesting to see the two major areas, UP and Tamil Nadu. And I think maybe you should get your guys to do, here is a case where you can judge whether the states have done as well as each other or one has done better. If Tamil Nadu has done a lot better than UP, that gives a message to UP. The other way around, if UP has done better, gives a message to Tamil Nadu. I think we need to focus. It's a very narrow issue. And once you focus the issue, people will realize that, yes, this is something we should be able to do. In my view, this excellent report, and I do compliment all the people who worked on it. I mean, you could extract from this report a list of 50 things which are very operational. I mean, there are other things that are long-term and so on. 50 operational things. And I honestly think that if you want to rate political parties, whether they deserve your political support or not, send out a list of these things and ask the party, how many of these things are you willing to say in your manifesto? And if you're not willing to say it in your manifesto, then Sunita will not approve, and the Center for Science and Environment will lobby against you. I mean, she's a powerful woman, so do that.
Patricia, let me come to you. And this time I'd like Amitabh and Raj to take on, well, it depends on what she's asking, of course, and who she's asking.
So today, paper, I have to inform the House that I edit a newspaper called the Shillong Times. I come from Meghalaya. I think we've spoken a lot about the mainstream. Let's go to the periphery now. We carried a story that 747 water sources in our state are in a crisis situation. That is the first critical matter to me, and I've come here because we need to learn from one another. The second point is we also have one of the most polluted areas in the country in a place called Barnihat today, which is a contradiction in terms considering Meghalaya is so rich in forest resources, or rather used to be. And the third point is my conversation with Richard Mahapatra this morning, where he says that Meghalaya is the state that is headed for a drought situation. I think that sounds to me to be very scary because we also have a place with the highest rainfall in the world. So we are a state of huge contradictions, and we have institutions that are working against each other. We have the state government, then we have the autonomous councils that have control over 96% of our forests and our land and our rivers. Then we have the village councils. All of them are working independently. They don't converge anywhere. So it's a very tough call. We also don't seem to have the rule of law operating. The NGT had banned coal mining in 2014, but that has gone underground. It's still being mined. 2 of our rivers are toxic in Jaintia Hills due to acid mine drainage. Nothing has been done about reclaiming those rivers. We have huge stone quarrying, which we sell to Bangladesh, both stone and sand. And we have limestone mines also, which are not reclaimed. You know, once they're abandoned, they're not reclaimed. And I think they are the ones that touch at our water resources. So I just want the panelists here to give us some ray of hope.
Okay. हाँ, just one, नहीं, 1 minute. हाँ,
मैं हिंदी में बात
हाँ,
करूंगा।
बिल्कुल।
प्रदीप हूँ जयपुर से। सर, मोंटेक सर और अमिताभ सर ने जो बात कही उसी को मैं करूंगा कि आपने जिक्र किया अमेरिका का कि वहाँ ये है, या हम यूरोप का जिक्र करते हैं, तो वहाँ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का कॉलोनी सिस्टम नहीं है सर। ये जो सिस्टम है कॉलोनियों के ऊपर अंग्रेजों द्वारा, आपने सर मेयर की बात की, कितने पावरफुल मेयर हैं भारत में? कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन आर्टिकल अमेंडमेंट 72 एंड 73 29 और 28 विभाग देने हैं निकायों को, जो आपकी म्युनिसिपल काउंसिल है, चाहे वो मेयर्स हैं या अध्यक्ष हैं, जो भी हैं, नहीं दे रहे हैं पावर। उनके पास पावर नहीं है। दे बॉडीज आर ऑटोनोमस बट डोंट हैव पावर। 4 विभाग लेके बैठे हैं वो लोग। पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल पे कार्रवाई करने का उनका अधिकार नहीं, उनके पास पैसा नहीं है, उनके पास सैलरी और पेंशन देने के पैसे नहीं। हाँ, अब आप उदाहरण दे सकते हैं इंदौर का। इंदौर इसलिए बेस्ट है क्योंकि वहां की सरकार एक आइडियल पोजीशन रखना चाहती है। गुजरात की सरकार सूरत को रखना चाहती है। अहमदाबाद तो नहीं हुआ, अगर वैसा ही हो पाता तो फैक्ट ये है कि हम चीजें कब तक एक दूसरे के ऊपर डिले करेंगे। सर, आपने कहा कि वहां हाउस टैक्स नहीं है। सर, वहां की पर कैपिटा इनकम $85,000 है और हम 2485 थे। खैर वो अलग है, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ ये फ्री वाली बात आई। लोक कल्याणकारी राज्य संविधान के प्रेम्बल में हमने डाला है, और फ्री कहां सर? सरकार कोई पैसा, आप इकोनॉमिस्ट है सर, इतने बड़े, पैसा पेड़ से नहीं झाड़ रही, वो पब्लिक से ही तो ले रही है। और बात ये है सर कि लंबा चौड़ा कुछ नहीं है कि हम लोग ये जो सिस्टम है, हमारे यहाँ पे जो एनवायरमेंट देख रहे हैं, डिपार्टमेंट देख रहे हैं, आईएएस देखते हैं, उसे हिस्ट्री पढ़ के आए हैं, जबकि ये टेक्निकल थिंग है। एक दिन कल्चर, दूसरे दिन एग्रीकल्चर। अगर एक अधिकारी, आईसीएस अधिकारी है, आप भारत के कितने विभाग है जिन पे हम गर्व कर सकते हैं? इसरो, आईएमडी, आर्मी, नेवी, एयरफोर्स, डीआरडीओ। क्यों? क्योंकि इनको आईएएस हेड नहीं करता सर। एयर इंडिया जब तक टाटा चलाता था बेहतर चला था। मैं ये कह रहा हूं, आप कॉलोनी सिस्टम पे देखिए सर एक बार प्लीज, और आपसे उम्मीदें हैं। एक लाइन कहूंगा कि फैक्ट्री पे पानी बरसता है और खेत पानी को तरसता है, जिंदगी का हाल खस्ता है, दूध महंगा और खून सस्ता है सर।
या
अब तो मेरे से बाहर जा रहा है कंट्रोल में। ये पॉलिटिकल डिस्कशंस नहीं है, टेक्निकल डिस्कशंस है, टू अंडरस्टैंड वेयर टू गो।
या मैम, दिस इज
I have madam and then I have you.
Thank you. So, hi, my name is Romita.
And let's stick to questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, my name is Romita. I'm an independent journalist. My question is for Mr. Ahluwalia. So, I work a lot with domestic workers, for example, or migrant workers, women domestic workers. So, as we know, climate changes, especially the extreme heat that we face in Delhi, it's these domestic workers, they are most vulnerable to this rising heat, you know. So when I talk to them, they tell me that earlier they would often walk to their workplace, even if it would take them an hour, you know. Every day they would leave in the morning and they would walk for an hour or so to reach their workplace. But now that they have free bus service, you know, so it's easier for them. So don't you think these subsidies, they are actually helping them against climate crisis? Because they are the most vulnerable people. What are your thoughts about that? That's
Good question.
Yeah. This is Sudarshan Sutra. I am a journalist from Bhubaneswar. Sir, you have said you have taken land, forest, and polluted air. Only water is the only common good you have left with people. That you want to snatch away. This is number one. Number two, in the name of smart cities, you are beautifying a part of city, only 2-3 kilometers of cities like Bhubaneswar. Third, you are telling
Sugarcane and paddy is consuming more water. What about 145 plants taking water from Hirakud Dam and not paying the dues in time? And what about hundreds of power plants, power plants? They are consuming more water. So I need an answer of all these things.
Disagree with any of those, right? You're basically saying anyone who uses water should pay for it.
मैम
And the more water they use, the more they should pay for it.
मैम
That
इस
is the point.
मैम
you
इसी में
make.
मेरा भी क्वेश्चन
Yes.
जोड़ लीजिए। मैं प्रेम हूँ नवभारत टाइम्स लखनऊ से।
हाँ.
सर हम लोग बात कर रहे थे जब फ्री बीज की, तो आप तो सर योजना आयोग में रहे, आप उसके परिवर्धित संस्करण नीति आयोग में रहे, बहुत ठीक से आपने अध्ययन किया होगा। ये प्रचलन क्या पिछले 10 साल में शुरू हुआ है क्या, सवाल ट्रांसफर करने वाला? मैं अपने सवाल पे सर आ रहा था। तो जब आप लोग फ्री बीज की बात कर रहे थे, तो एक उसी के साथ एक पैरेलल डिबेट जो चलती है एनपीए की, तो आप लोगों ने तो लंबा समय बिताया है, तो आपने एनालाइज किया है क्या कि फ्री बीज पे कितना खर्च हो रहा है और जो कारपोरेट लोन्स और एनपीएज माफ हो रहे हैं उस पे कितना खर्च हो रहा है? क्योंकि बहुत बार ये लगता है कि ये एक प्रिविलेज क्लास की चलाई हुई डिबेट तो नहीं है, एक बड़े मेजर सेक्टर को किनारे के।
आप दोनों के बिहाफ पे कुछ इन चीजों का आंसर कर सकती हूँ क्या, इफ यू डोंट माइंड? ये नहीं, प्लीज, बिकॉज आई वांट टू ब्रिंग अ डिफरेंट आइडिया हियर। ये थोड़ा सा फ्रीबी वर्सेस पॉपुलिज्म का जो आइडिया है, इसको मैं मॉन्टेक और अमिताभ एंड राज के सामने भी कुछ आंकड़े रखना चाहती हूँ। मैं इनकी बात से बिल्कुल सहमत हूँ कि पानी के ऊपर दाम लगना चाहिए, मगर मैं इनको ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि अगर आप पानी के ऊपर दाम लगाएंगे, आपको उसके निकास के पानी के ऊपर भी दाम लगाना पड़ेगा, कि सुएज कितना निकलता है उसका भी दाम लगाना पड़ेगा। और सुएज 80%, इसका मतलब अगर आपके घर में 100 लीटर पानी आता है तो 80 लीटर हर रोज वो सुएज निकास के पानी में निकलता है। अब आप मेरी बात जो थी उसका थोड़ा ध्यान रखिए, जो मैंने अफोर्डेबिलिटी और इंक्लूसिविटी की बात करी थी। जो अमिताभ और मॉन्टेक कह रहे हैं, मैं आपको चैलेंज करती हूं कि अगर आप दाम लगाएंगे, सही दाम लगाएंगे, जो मैं मानती हूं लगाना चाहिए, कि कितना पानी लोगों के घर तक पहुंचा, कितना निकास का पानी निकला, सुएज निकला, कितना आपने पाइपलाइन पे इन्वेस्ट किया उस सुएज को कन्वे करने के लिए, कितना इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का दाम लगा उसके अंदर, कितना फिर आपका ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट एसटीपी बिल्डिंग का दाम लगा, उसका ट्रीटमेंट करके आपने साफ पानी नदी में डाला। जो फ्लश करता है उसको उस नदी का दाम, साफ करने का दाम भी देना पड़ेगा। अगर आप वो दाम लगाते हैं, और इसीलिए मैं, जब आप इकोनॉमिस्ट की बात करते हैं, जब आप, जो आपका आइडिया बिल्कुल सही है, मगर जब आप उसके पूरी जो मैथ्स अगर तय करें तो मॉन्टेक कोई नहीं दे पाएगा उस दाम को एट दिस करंट रेट ऑफ मैनेजमेंट. So I have done the maths on that, Montek, in terms of what is the cost of delivery of water, what is the cost of taking back the water and treating it. Today, literally, the rich of India are, the political economy is that they are being subsidized to defecate in, okay? But the point I'm making to you, and the only difference I'm making with both of you is, if you want the pricing to work, you will also have to make sure that the system becomes affordable so that everybody can pay for it. Otherwise, you will end up with seeing a situation where even the rich will not be able to pay. And today the state pays for the
very little. Everybody should pay, but you should charge very little for those who consume very less, or those who come from a poor background, and keep increasing it as the consumption keeps rising.
The current system of resource management, it is so capital intensive that even the rich cannot afford to pay for it. If you take a simple example of saying, you know, these maths, I've done 3 books called Excreta Matters. So give me some, so the only difference I make, so a per kilometer, if you look at today cost of supply of water, it is close to about in terms of kiloliters, it's about 2 rupees, 3 rupees. The cost, if you put the whole system cost in, per family, you will have to pay something like 20 rupees per kiloliter. Now that adds up to a point where you, again, it's the same point, people will not afford to pay for it. Okay, okay. Yes, absolutely.
This has to be brought out by you journalists. She thinks that, I mean, I go back to my friend Rakesh Mohan, who very often when he met, he was, before he made the mistake of going into the RBI, he used to work on cities, urban.
Yes, I know
He
Rakesh.
tell me that he would go and address people and ask them, "Bhai, how much are you paying for your electricity?" Everybody knew. How much are you paying for water? Nobody knew. So the fact of the matter is, even if the rich had to pay 10 times what they're currently paying for water, and by the way, if they didn't pay, the water supply would be cut off, they would pay. And these are people who are, as somebody said, using pressure to wash their cars and this and that. Look, there should be no sympathy for this lot. I would go further. And what he said, I mean, in the Planning Commission, when we were recommending water pricing, we consistently said you can have free lifeline supply.
Yes.
You have to decide what is a lifeline supply.
Fair enough.
So, so many per person, so many liters, average of 5 persons per household, so many liters a day. And that first round of water can be free. Then you can have 2 slabs, as he put it. Beyond the lifeline, the sort of fellows who just have scooters and maybe cycles charge a little more. Once you get to the automobile fellow, I mean, there should be not only zilch subsidy, they should cross-subsidize the other fellows. And I tell you, I don't know what your results end up saying, but ask yourself the following question. Everybody who has, let's say, I won't say BMWs, but let's say a Camry hybrid, that's me.
Yeah.
Then I know, okay? Everybody who's using a Camry hybrid type of household, how many liters of water and what would it cost? And if I were to compare what I'm paying for petrol, I mean, why wouldn't I be willing to pay?
No, absolutely.
And you shouldn't let these guys get away with this nonsense.
Give you another example of the poorest of the poor. And I went to Nagpur in the most difficult slum colony and I interacted with women. All women. This poorest slum area of Nagpur did not have a water supply. And then the Nagpur municipality worked out a PPP, not a government-led scheme, a private-public partnership scheme, which ensured that flowing pipe water started coming to that. And interacted with 150 women. They said that when there was no water, they could not even clean their utensils. It led to huge diseases amongst the children. They said, we are willing to pay. And now that water started flowing, the PPP operator was charging them for water, minimal amount, because it was a scheme spread over several areas, but they were charging. Said, we are willing to pay any amount for flowing water. It's people want to pay for water. It's the politicians and administrators who do not want to charge for water. Everybody, and the important point he was making is, put meters for water, put meters for power, electricity. The only way India will transform is when we technologically leapfrog like we've done with UPI, with fast payments on mobile, etc. India needs good technology. People want to pay. It's politicians who don't want to pay.
No,
and we want to push for populism.
I have absolutely no doubt on this.
Water mafia.
Parking is a classic case where Anumita and I have taken this matter to the Supreme Court, but we cannot get a parking charge in Delhi, which means anything because the rich of Delhi refuse to pay.
Look, when you say refuse to pay, what you mean is if you ask them, are you happy? They'll say no. But what does refuse to pay mean? Yeah. if he refuses to pay,
Good
attack
point.
his car under
Very
the
good
ED
point.
and say, you're not paid your bills. I mean, I don't buy this at all.
I agree.
Let me say one thing that, it's easy to blame politicians, but of course, and they should be. But the biggest mafia is the guys who run the tankers.
Mm.
Frankly, if you charged a system that would make the piped water supply adequate, the first thing that would be disconnected is tankers. Please find out who owns the tankers that are currently being used. Most of them are being used by the poor because they don't get water, and they're being used by the rich when they don't get enough water.
Yeah.
So the rich are only topping up.
Good
For
point.
that topping up, they're paying a huge amount. They're paying 1,000 rupees per tanker or something like that. So, frankly, I think the
Yeah,
failure to
3,000.
allow prices to
3,000.
work
Okay.
is a major problem.
I'm going to open up another round of questions, but I want this populism versus prices put behind. We can have the fights over lunch now on this. So yes, I have you in the middle. I'll come to you, and then I'll come to you, Jayanto. Ha, theek hai. I've seen all the hands waving like this. I will come to everyone. Ha.
Good afternoon. Irfan from Economic Times. I just want to understand, we will go back to the peripherals of the country. For example, J&K and other places. So as economists, do you think the conflict should be factored in when you talk about pricing of the resources? It should be a constant in wherever there is a conflict. For example, in J&K, we are 65% of our electricity generated goes out to the northern grid due to unfavorable agreements with the federal government or with the institutions that are there. And then there are transmission losses. And now what we are seeing is rampant smart metering of J&K, which is becoming an issue. And it may turn into a political and a law and order issue in future as well, where even the poor of the poorest are charged with rupees 2,000 every month. And it's a flat rate. Basic starts from 1,750. And yeah, and the point is that when we talk about the state, as the Constitution and the Supreme Court says, has to provide the security and safety to the citizens. And in conflict areas, it's not able to do that. Number one is that. Number two is when we see a lot of institutions operating in these areas which don't have the accountability, and they have the legal backing for not being accountable, and then they're using the resources that are available there. So how do we factor it in those bills that come to a common man? And who is not getting the safety, who is not getting the security, who is not getting the requisite development? Then why is he paying the bills? And then there are the governance issues of transmission losses and all. How do we factor all of that in when you say pricing all the resources?
Yes. अभी आपको मैं पीछे नहीं दूंगी, पहले फिर मैं आपसे कहूंगी, फिर जयंतो, फिर मैं पीछे आती हूँ. ठीक? Yes, please. Take my mic if needed.
So much. I'm Srishti Chaudhary from CNN News 18. Sir, my question is to Mr. Kant. You talked about air pollution in Delhi, how it's a failure of governance. You talked about action not being taken against the power plants, the biomass burning. My actually question to you is that we have a lot of data now that it's mostly vehicular emissions, and somehow we see that it becomes a blame game about stubble burning. So what is really stopping the action in those fronts that you enlisted just a while ago? So yeah,
Please.
Thank you.
Question. Very important. Maybe you can answer it right away.
So I'm a great believer that Delhi's air pollution is not about stubble burning. There are many aspects to this, and about 35% of this pollution happens because of power plants. 36 units. I think only 7 of them have this FGDs. Rest do not have it, and that time limit is getting extended. So that's one aspect of it. Second is about 15% of it happens because of boilers and industrial units, and boilers are totally outdated. They need to be, the boilers and industry, government needs to act against them. Third is the brick kiln factories around Rajasthan and all this area, on which they are all working on outdated technologies. They need to be very concerted action on them. And the fourth, I think, is that there is a lot of biomass burning within Delhi. And that all needs to be backed up by LPG supplies. And the last point, I'm a great believer that Delhi must go fully, it's 100% EVs on two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and Delhi must have all electric buses. And we should force people to travel by buses, not by cars. We should also, and this requires, to my mind, a very clear mandate that all vehicles in Delhi, slowly, we should put the CAFE norm to push them towards electric vehicles. There's no challenge about two-wheelers, three-wheelers. Actually, my view is that on all 42 cities which figure in the 50 cities of India, 50 of the worst polluting cities of the world, we should put CAFE norms on two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and on four-wheelers. All petrol, diesel vehicles should be taken out. This requires very strict, firm action, very ruthless, tough, firm action. This requires tough governance. And this requires us to move towards electric buses. It's not about people not traveling by electric buses. People are not traveling by buses because people want to travel by cars. You have to provide a better, comfortable way of traveling through electric buses and push them. So you need multi-track action on all these fronts to clean up the air pollution of Delhi, to my mind. But I wanted to touch upon this issue which was raised about Meghalaya, because I think that's a very important question, and Meghalaya is very, very sensitive state in terms of, its sustainability. And I think the points being raised by her were very, very disturbing to my mind about some area being very polluting and probably being the worst polluting, and the lakes all drying up. It will have a huge detrimental impact on Meghalaya. And I mean, I wasn't aware of this because one only goes to Shillong and some areas and come back. But I think we need a very detailed study on Meghalaya to work on this, but it's a very, very important point that was raised.
Good. Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Amitabh. आपके पास माइक है. हाँ. अच्छा, मैं अब लास्ट दो लूंगी दोनों से, आपसे और आपसे, ठीक है? And then I'm done. And Jayanto, of course. तीन. हाँ.
ये आप दोनों ब्यूरोक्रेट्स अलग अलग रिजिम में पॉलिसी मेकिंग के पायोनियर रहे हैं.
हाँ.
मैं एक चीज जानना चाह रहा हूं कि जैसे सीएजी जो परफॉर्मेंस ऑडिट खास करके 4-5 साल से कर रहा है, उसमें इन्वायरमेंट पर रेयर होता है, खास करके स्टेट लेवल में. बहुत कम स्टेट्स में सीएजी की ओर से इन्वायरमेंट की परफॉर्मेंस ऑडिट की जाती है. इसके लिए क्या किया जा सकता है? एक. दूसरा, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट डिफरेंट स्टेट्स में आउटकम बजट शुरू हो गया है. डिफरेंट स्टेट्स में आउटपुट, अब पहले केवल आउटले और आउटपुट होता था, अब आउटकम बजट भी. लेकिन उसमें आप देखेंगे कि मात्र 7-8 डिपार्टमेंट्स का होता है जिसमें फॉरेस्ट, इन्वायरमेंट एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज का आउटकम बजट अधिकतर राज्यों में नहीं होता है. 7-8 स्टेट की तो मैंने स्टडी की है, बाकी साथी बता पाएंगे कि अधिकतर राज्यों में इन्वायरमेंट का आउटकम बजट कोई भी स्टेट गवर्नमेंट नहीं ले करती. इस पर क्या हो सकता है? तीसरा, नेशनल ग्रीन ट्रिब्यूनल एक टूथलेस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनता जा रहा है. खासकर वो पेनाल्टी लगाता है स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर, और पेनाल्टी में ये होता है कि आप ये पैसा, इतना पेनाल्टी का पैसा सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट पर खर्च कर दीजिए. और कोई भी अधिकतर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट अधिकतर मामलों में, खासकर मैं झारखंड से हूं, मैं जानता हूं 99% मामलों में एनजीटी के किसी भी ऑर्डर को स्टेट गवर्नमेंट वैल्यू नहीं देती है, ओबे नहीं करती है. तो क्या इसकी जगह इन्वायरमेंटल ओम्बुड्समैन एक अच्छा विकल्प हो सकता है? इसके लिए इनिशिएटिव किया जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि नेशनल ग्रीन ट्रिब्यूनल बिल्कुल टूथलेस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लगातार.
नहीं, बहुत अच्छे सवाल. Can you hold the questions, because all very interesting outcome. Budget, whole issue about rating of chief ministers on environment and NGT. Yes. हाँ, आप. नहीं, आप नहीं. I have 2 women and 1 Jayanto. And yeah, exactly. Yes.
My question is to Mr. Ahluwalia regarding before tea break. Sir said कि हमें awareness की बात करनी चाहिए on consumption of food and all. So during the times of food insecurity, I just want to know, it is not new for the country. When it started with the Green Revolution, we used to have a food. India ने progress किया production पे rather than nutritious food, which in fact Down to Earth has reported on as well. क्योंकि हमें production दिखाना था that we are fully secured in food, but not with the nutritious food. First of all, that. And what about regarding during the times when Government of India decrease the finances, the budget for the Nutrition Institute of India, and then on other hand, we'll say कि poor को nutritious food लेना चाहिए. मेरा पहला ये सवाल है. And second question to Amitabh sir, is India really ready to fill the vacuum during the times जब हमें EV mission की तरफ जाना चाहिए, जबकि China is master in every production, raw material, battery production, and we don't even have a plan to discard the batteries.
Okay, good point. Yes.
Hello, my name is Chaitrali Sandorkar. I work for Maharashtra Times. I'm from Pune. My basic question is, all experts are giving viable ideas and viable plannings, but when it comes to vote bank, political leaders, they don't, they accept it orally, but when it comes to implementation, they disagree. So water pricing and parking issue, as we are discussing, it is on paper in Maharashtra also, in every almost in every states, but when it comes to implementation, वो होता नहीं. So is it necessary to sensitize political leaders and local politicians who actually connecting with common people?
Good. Jayanto?
Jayanto Basu from Telegraph, Kolkata. I have a question for Dr. Kant. You have mentioned about the governance issue in municipalities and the states and the responsibility for the environmental mess that has been created around the country. Just I would like to know from you, sir, that India, when we look at the climate action ranking, it's quite high up in the world. I think my memory goes, the German Watch report saying 7th globally. But when you look at the environmental performance report, we are virtually at the bottom, 176 or something of that sort. Have we failed to mainstream climate action in the environmental action in the country? Are we going for the market-driven and mitigation-driven climate action so the rest of the environment seems to be getting compromised? And also, if you look at the just released report that in the SDG, India has actually slipped in the last year and 109 or something of that sort. So how do you see this? And what is the way out of this kind of apparent discord between the environmental action and the climate action in the country?
Okay, very, very interesting questions have been asked. I'm going to leave it, I think, some very important things, and I will ask Amitabh actually for you to start first. And then I will come to Raj and Montek for the final flourish.
उन्होंने तो बड़ा ही कॉम्प्लेक्स एक सवाल पूछा था जिसको कि मेरे गुरुजी केवल आंसर कर सकते हैं कि ये एनजीटी को क्या ओम्बुड्समैन में बदल दिया जाए. तो बहुत ही कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी थी उस सवाल में और मेरे में इतना ज्ञान है नहीं. तो मैं touch upon the question which was asked about whether we can fill the vacuum. देखिए मेरा जो विश्वास है कि in the long run technology race is never won by the one who starts the initial disruption. The race has just begun. आप अगर ये देखिएगा कि जिसने इंटरनेट शुरू किया था, क्लाइव ऑसबॉर्न ने, he did not win the race, Google won the race. जिसने लैपटॉप शुरू किया था उसने रेस नहीं जीती, एप्पल ने रेस जीती लॉन्ग टर्म में. तो अभी तो टेक्नोलॉजी डिसरप्शन शुरू हुए हैं और मेरे विचार से कि lithium battery is not the final solution. There are many other technologies, aluminum, sodium, etc. will come in. And Indians should innovate a lot in many of these new areas of growth. और बट एक चीज मेरे दिमाग में बड़ा क्लियर है कि हमारे देश में करीब 72% शहरें टू व्हीलर्स पर चलती हैं. अगर हम टू व्हीलर्स ना केवल मैन्युफैक्चर करते हैं बट एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं. अगर पूरा मार्केट दुनिया का बदल रहा है और वो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स पे जा रहा है, तो अगर हम इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स पर नहीं शिफ्ट करेंगे तो हम अपनी पूरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग दुनिया में खो देंगे. इसलिए हमें इलेक्ट्रिक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का चैंपियन बनना जरूरी है, और ना केवल टू व्हीलर्स, थ्री व्हीलर्स. और हमारा जो साइज और स्केल है इंडिया का, वो आपको डोमेस्टिक मार्केट देता है. चाइना में क्या होता है, वो पहले दुनिया के मार्केट के बारे में सोचते हैं, एक्सपोर्ट के बारे में. हम अपने डोमेस्टिक मार्केट के सोचते रहते हैं. तो हमारे जो टू व्हीलर्स और थ्री व्हीलर्स के मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, अगर ये दुनिया में के बारे में सोचें और एक्सपोर्ट पेनिट्रेशन के बारे में सोचेंगे, जो कि कई लोग करने लगे हैं. ये आपका ओला, एथर, ये बहुत बढ़िया टू व्हीलर्स बना रहे हैं, और उन्होंने फोर्स किया, स्टार्टअप्स ने फोर्स किया कि बजाज और टीवीएस भी इलेक्ट्रिक टू व्हीलर्स बनाए. तो इस समय सबने बनाना शुरू किया और मार्केट में बड़ा कंपटीशन चल रहा है इसके लिए. फोर व्हीलर्स में टाटाज ने रेस शुरू की अपनी इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स के साथ. जो महिंद्रा की जो नई कार्स आई हैं, ये मेरे विचार से, और मैंने ट्रायल रन के बाद में कह रहा हूँ, ये टेस्ला की गाड़ियों से अच्छी गाड़ियाँ हैं, जिसमें इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ आईओटी विद ऑटोमोटिव इंजीनियरिंग हुआ है. और टेस्ला जब इंडिया में आएगी, ये इस प्राइस पॉइंट पर वो मैच नहीं कर पाएगी. तो मेरा जो विचार है कि इंडिया को दिखाना चाहिए कि इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल के क्षेत्र में टू व्हीलर्स, थ्री व्हीलर और फोर व्हीलर्स में हम ग्लोबल चैंपियंस बनेंगे और बन सकते हैं. दूसरा कि जब हम ये मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करते हैं, हमें कंपोनेंट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग उसकी आवश्यक है और बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग उसकी आवश्यक है. बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए करीब 100 गीगावाट बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग अनाउंस हो चुकी है. मारुति, सुजुकी, मारुति, टाटाज, ये आपके जो एग्जिस्टिंग बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, ये सब जा रहे हैं इलेक्ट्रिक लिथियम बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए. और मेरे विचार से ये 3-4 साल के अंदर हम बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में भी क्वांटम जंप लगाएंगे. और मेरा अपना विचार है कि ये वैक्यूम कोई और देश नहीं कर सकता, केवल इंडिया कर सकता है, क्योंकि साइज और स्केल इंडिया में है. दूसरी चीज जो हमें मेरे विचार से करनी बहुत आवश्यक है, देखिए क्लाइमेटिकली ब्लेस्ड बहुत कम देश हैं. इंडिया रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के लिए क्लाइमेटिकली ब्लेस्ड है, और जो क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस इंडिया में हैं वो केवल सऊदी अरेबिया में है और एक दो लैटिन अमेरिकन छोटी कंट्रीज में है, और कहीं नहीं है. तो हमने क्या किया है कि ना केवल 200 गीगावाट रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की है, पर 24 रुपए से 2 रुपए तक हम उसका प्राइस गिरा सके हैं. और वो हुआ है दो कारणों से. एक तो भारत एक अकेला देश है जहां एक ग्रिड है पूरे देश में. ये यूरोप में भी नहीं है, अमेरिका में भी नहीं है. तो जो आप रिन्यूएबल पावर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं साउथ में, तमिलनाडु में या गुजरात में, वो आप ट्रांसमिट कर पाते हैं. दूसरा, भारत ने एक पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव लिया था जिसमें कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट और आरबीआई ने एक मैकेनिज्म शुरू किया कि अगर डिस्कॉम पे नहीं करता तो आरबीआई वो डिडक्ट करता है. ये पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव है, जिसकी वजह से जो रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी सेक्टर इंडिया में डेवलप हुआ, वो सारा प्राइवेट सेक्टर में हुआ, और प्राइवेट इक्विटी और वेंचर कैपिटल आया इसमें. ये सारा प्राइवेट इनिशिएटिव से हुआ, ये गवर्नमेंट ने नहीं किया. तो मेरे विचार से प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने दिखाया कि ये वायबल मार्केट है, क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस हैं, आप रिन्यूएबल कर सकते हैं और लो प्राइस में कर सकते हैं. और रिन्यूएबल आपने कर दिया. मेरे विचार से तो 2030 का जो हमारा टारगेट है 500 का, हमें एम करना चाहिए कि हम 750 गीगावाट करेंगे 2030 तक. और हमें ये इस समय एम्बिशन दिखा के और क्या क्या पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव ले सकते हैं वो करना चाहिए. तीसरी चीज, कि हम करीब 180 बिलियन का फॉसिल फ्यूल इंपोर्ट करते हैं, 180 बिलियन का, ये हमारा सबसे बड़ा इंपोर्ट है। हम जब रिन्यूएबल प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, मैं 750 गीगावाट इसलिए कह रहा हूं क्योंकि भारत का जो लक्ष्य होना चाहिए कि वो रिन्यूएबल को उपयोग करके पानी को क्रैक करके ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन बनाए, क्योंकि ये फ्यूल ऑफ द फ्यूचर है ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन। और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन इस समय $4.5 पर है पर किलोग्राम। हमारा लक्ष्य होना चाहिए, हम $4.5 पर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, पर अमेरिका की क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशन में वो $7.5 पर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं। $7.5 पर वो इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन एक्ट के थ्रू वो सब्सिडाइज करते हैं, और उनकी सब्सिडी बहुत ज्यादा है, और हमें इतनी सब्सिडी देने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। और हमारा लक्ष्य होना चाहिए कि 2030 तक हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन $1 पर ले आए, साइज और स्केल इंडिया का उपयोग करके, और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन के हम दुनिया के चीपेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर बने, लार्जेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर बने, और हम बिगेस्ट एक्सपोर्टर बने, और हम इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर जिससे ये बनता है उसके बहुत बड़े मैन्युफैक्चरर बने। तो हम क्लीन एनर्जी, ना केवल भारत को ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन जो क्लीन एनर्जी है उससे चला पाएंगे, बल्कि हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन से को एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे उसकी लिक्विड फॉर्म एमोनिया में, और हम एक्सपोर्टर बनेंगे क्लीन एनर्जी के। तो हम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स, और ये संभावना किसी और देश में नहीं है जो कि भारत में है। तो ये टेक्नोलॉजिकल लीप फ्रॉगिंग और पोल वॉल्टिंग होगी, और मेरे विचार से हमारा लक्ष्य बड़ा क्लियर होना चाहिए कि हम ये करके दिखाएंगे 2030 तक। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Amitabh. Very interesting. Raj, you want to add anything to the questions that were asked? Any point you want to make, please?
Not very much, but जितने भी यहाँ सवाल उठे हैं, basically they are all pointing towards one sense, and which is कि okay, problems identify हो रही हैं. We have issues of pollution, we have issues of water management, we have issues of governance issues and things like that. So the hunger and the anxiety is basically कि अच्छा solution क्या है? How are we going to really address these? And that is the challenge, really speaking. अब हम identify करते हैं कि okay, the municipal governance is at a low ebb. How do you actually raise it to a point where they are able to competently manage cities? This is exactly the challenge that is there that needs to be addressed. There are different players involved. There is, of course, the political leadership. There is the administrative leadership. There is the citizenry. All three have to somehow or the other coalesce and be able to find a solution to address. Citizen ki need hai, the institutional framework is available, etc. Now strengthen wo kaise hoega, structure wo kaise hoega, those are the questions that we have to raise and we have to find answers. I mean, we don't have all the answers. Abhi tak, so basically it's a quest to get the solutions. First, to get the sensitivity of these deficits in the widest possible cross-section of people, both the players and the administrators. And secondly, that to be able to cooperate and find that the solutions that are provided or are given, etc., are implemented honestly and sincerely. That is really the purpose of this whole conversation here. While we have been able to identify the problems, we really don't have all the answers at this point of time. It's a search for answers that, in this whole environment, that is our mandate, or shall we say our requirement for moving ahead.
Thank you, Raj. Very wise words. Montek. One issue that was raised was, the whole issue of cities and the power of the local leadership there. And, a lot was done initially to bring in the amendments to strengthen both the village leadership as well as the city leadership. Do you see that work is sort of unfinished work, something that we need to do more? Because You know, a lot of the conversation today has been around cities. But frankly, the power of the mayor in an Indian city versus the power of a mayor anywhere else is very different. Richard, very burning. Otherwise, I've got orders from Chupannu to wind up. Bolo.
Always a good idea to wind up if you've got orders.
I've got orders. But Richard,
Cutting into other
Richard,
session time.
quickly. हाँ रिचर्ड को माइक चाहिए कोई माइक दे रिचर्ड को okay
Many other which are not in work of local governance.
okay. So city government, and do you see that as an unfinished agenda?
Let me thank everybody for educating me, because I found this discussion very interesting. I'm not going to sum up. I'm just using this opportunity to make what is called a concluding statement. I think one of the most intellectually lazy things that we traditionally do is to blame things on implementation. I mean, when I was in the Planning Commission, many friends in industry would say, "Saab, aapke plan to bahut badhiya hai, lekin implementation is bad." Now, actually, that is not correct. When a plan doesn't get translated, it's not implementation. It could be that it was badly designed, infeasible to begin with, chose the wrong instruments to achieve a given objective, was never actually monitored, so you don't know what's happening. And all of these things ultimately are called implementation failures. They are a way of explaining the fact that we paint beautiful slogan pictures, and what happens is totally different. And so we say the fact that we've painted these pictures means we had a plan, and the implementation is fault. Actually, politicians love this because that can be blamed on the bureaucracy. हमने तो plan बनाया, आप लोगों ने implement नहीं किया. Actually, we need much greater clarity. First of all, I mean, slogans are important all over the world, and we should have slogans. But then each slogan must be translated into a pretty concrete, quantifiable objective. What is the objective? I mean, for example, in the case of, let's say, renewable energy, the objective is by 2030, so many gigawatts of renewable capacity consisting of so much solar, so much wind. That's a very quantifiable objective. And you know, at the end of the day, one will be able to say, but you said you would achieve this objective. Did you or didn't you? Now, the second thing is, how are you going to achieve that objective? One way of conceiving the problem is, have you got the right policy framework? I mean, for example, are you going to say that this is going to be achieved by the private sector, or is it going to be achieved by the government? This is a very fundamental thing. Because if it is to be achieved by the government, you must ask, where's the money coming from? If it's being achieved by the private sector, you must ask, have the conditions, if you like, the policy environment made it possible for the private sector to respond? If they haven't, then it's not a failure of implementation, it is bad design. And I think most of the things at least my experience, and I'm not commenting on the last 10 years because I haven't been inside government, but I can say this used to happen earlier, and my suspicion is that it continues. Most civil servants, if asked by the Prime Minister were to call a civil servant and say, "Ki bhai, hamare Olympic medals bahut kam hai. They must be increased from X to Y." Ministry of Sports will immediately come forward and say, "Yes, we will have a national Olympic medal winning Yojana." Okay. What does that mean? I will decide what to do. You give me this much money. Okay. And then you go to the finance ministry and they will say, in the old days, they would say, first go to the planning commission, and we would stick our foot in, raise some questions. Then planning commission would go to finance ministry. In the end, the guy would get about half of what he said he wanted. It's not clear, by the way, that he deserves the full amount. But it's also not clear whether the guys who gave him half actually worked out, is it possible? And then he would implement a mission based on that. I mean, a lot of these smart cities make Mumbai into Shanghai. I mean, this has been going on for so long. I think we need to be clear. What is it when you're changing the policy? Like, for example, way back in 1991, when we said abolish import control on a whole lot of things and free the exchange rate, that was a policy. Nobody, I mean, the other approach could have been that we will start a new dynamic export expansion yojana in the Commerce Ministry, which would mean subsidy, and they would come forward along. We didn't do that. We said the problem is you're not letting the private sector function, get rid of these controls. And I think it worked quite well. So even today, you have to first ask, is this being implemented by government or is it being implemented by the private sector? If it is the private sector, please talk to the private sector. Is the system working? You know, sometimes you get something in between, like, for example, renewable energy. Now, what we've got on renewable energy, you have the technology, there are lots of stuff coming up, lots of private sector guys who want. The big fault is they don't believe that the distribution companies will pay them because we're running a system that is broke on the distribution side. I think we've solved it in a sensible way. I approve of it.
I agree.
The Solar Electricity Corporation, what it has done is taken on the risk.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people think that this is a permanent solution. It isn't. Because if the distribution companies keep failing, it just means the government of India will be burdened in saving SECI, because SECI has to pay the generator. And if they're not getting the money, if the distributors aren't giving them the money, well, where are they going to get it from? But it started the process, and we've got a whole lot of fellows who are now, at least nobody can say that Indian private sector can't run a solar plant, can't put up a solar plant, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
I think, but the crux of it really is, and this is where I come to my solutions. I think we are running an electricity pricing regulatory system that is broke. I think our regulators should not be allowed to declare regulatory assets. If a generator is not paid, what these guys do is they say, okay, you're due this money, we'll call it a regulatory asset. You can earn, you can charge on future power on the basis of the rate of return you should be earning on this asset, which really means you have financed the loss, okay? That's not the way to run a private sector system. So the first policy thing is, great, we've set up the SEC, let us privatize distribution. I'm firmly of the view that we should do that. And by the way, Sheila Dikshit did it in Delhi. And it's worked extremely well, okay? And if I may say so, this may look anti-Kejriwal, and I have no intention of being anti-Kejriwal. He's a good man in many ways. Sheila Dikshit said to me that you were the one recommending that we should privatize Delhi. We privatize Delhi. The tariffs are being set by a regulator. And Mr. Kejriwal, when he won the election against Mrs. Dikshit, he won it on the grounds. Ye itna charge kar rahe hain power ke liye. Look at UP next door. UP is charging 1/3. And Sheila went around saying, but UP is charging 1/3, but they're having power cuts of 18 hours a day. So do you want me to charge 1/3 and have power cut? But people didn't think about that. They just kicked her out. Maybe they kicked her out for other reasons also. But I think we must be very clear that if a guy gets up and says, I am going to privatize the distribution system, are you fellows going to write editorials in support or against? My guess is most of you will write against. But don't expect the politician to say privatize. In my view, if you don't privatize, you will not get a decent decent supply system. I was recently in Ahmedabad and I was talking to these torrent guys. And they run some of the private Ahmedabad and Surat and others and so on. And they said the experience is excellent. I mean, you know, in Bhiwandi, for example, which is Maharashtra, they got the franchise to run the thing as a private thing, and it's working beautifully. Losses are down from whatever, 50% to 8% or so, and it's profitable. And then, you know, one person said, but they said, you know, sir, what has happened is that because we have been so efficient, we have become a benchmark for the Gujarat public sector distribution company, which has also improved, which is good. So I said, fine, don't privatize the whole thing. Let every state privatize half the distribution system and let it become a basis for judging. And if the private sector does a good job, the public sector will also do the same thing. And you know, in a way, they will use that as a political support against political interference. Because when political interference takes place, they will say, "Saab, aap wahan nahi kar rahe hain, why are you doing it here?" But without privatization, it won't happen. Now, I don't see anything in State of India's environment recommending that. So the next one I recommend you, come clean and say what you want. And you know, this notion that the public will not stand for it, this is utter nonsense.
So let me
finish.
wrap up. Okay.
Let me finish.
You finished.
I'm finishing. When you start letting the private sector run hotels,
Yes.
I have never heard of anybody saying, I don't want to go there. There's only the Ramada Hotel or there's a Radisson Blue. If it had been Ashoka Hotel, I would have gone. No one says that. Nobody misses the public sector in this area. I don't think anyone misses public sector Air India also. I mean, Air India hasn't got to the standard that Vistara had achieved, but hopefully they will. So, you know, frankly, we are missing these things out and we are expecting too much from government-run programs. I mean, there is a role for government-run programs, no question about it. But I think the idea that everything is going to be done by the government is fundamentally wrong. And I'm not sure how many, let me now pose to you, because I have to get something out of this meeting. On this issue, those who agree with me, please raise your hands. And those that don't agree with me, don't raise your hand.
I agree with you on privatizing hotels.
Your audience doesn't.
So let me.
Look, if I were a politician, let me put it another. If I was a politician and asked me, you test all this out. And if you get at least half the hands, I will say so. He will look at this and say, forget it. I'm not saying so. As a result, you're going to keep getting the lousy service you're getting. That's it.
I think, Montek, let me wrap up now, because I think we have a very interesting discussion. And clearly there are differences, but I would argue that they're not that wide, okay? It's, you know, Montek talked about the need to change approaches. And to me, that's the big fundamental issue. I can see the system is broken, not because of the lack of intention, the lack of policy. We need to change approach. So I totally agree, Montek, with that position. Now, where the difference becomes is the only issue privatization versus public, or is it a combination of the two? And I think there also, Montek, and we are basically saying it's not a mantra, but it clearly is something which will help to move the needle. To me, the issue then becomes, how do you make sure that public policy objectives are met? And that's where the issue also came up. Can you cross-subsidize? Can you make sure that the poorest still get their need for water? They get the free bus that the woman can use now to get to work in hot times. So all that is part of a process in which you account for the poorest and the public need of the poorest. So it's not a simple mantra to say privatize the bus. The mantra is about making sure that public service is maintained. So I think that's where the complexity of it is. My only argument with both of you would be that it's not as simple as one or the other. We, in our conversation, are very clear that privatization, there is nothing wrong with privatization, okay? Most of us would argue that a lot of these services need to be privatized. But then we would also argue with you that the system for regulatory controls has to be strong, the governance, the monitoring has to be strong, and the public purpose of the service has to be maintained. I think if that is the case, and my only plea to all of you is, if all that is done, you still have to look at a different approach. And I want to end with saying, Swati, right? Swati. Swati, I apologize. I threw out an idea, and that's, the kind of thing that I should not have done. So I threw out an idea which is very dear to me, which is a wood-based economy, where I'm basically arguing that we should grow wood to cut it and to regrow it and build an economy, a change. Now, Swati came to me saying, how can you say something like that? That will lead to, and two more people in the room came. I'm sorry, I threw out the idea without explaining. Obviously, I'm not meaning pristine forests, but I'm also supporting many of the ideas from here to say we will need to come up with a better land use so that a lot of the land that we have, which is not used productively, can move towards it. And how do we make sure that local communities benefit? So I just wanted to make the point that I'm sorry, I threw out the idea without explaining it. There's a lot more to it, and maybe we'll get a chance to discuss it as well. But I want to end this with Vibha. Vibha, I want you to, because you have a captive audience here, you won't get it in the thing. So we have a treat for you now. We have a first, what do you call it? A biodiversity lunch planned for you, which Vibha has curated. Vibha does books on what is called first food, which is we are looking at recipes that work for nutrition, biodiversity, and livelihoods. So,
thank you. So from all this food for thought to simple food, we are going to serve you a very special lunch, which is called Servings from the Green Kitchen. So what is Green Kitchen? The Green Kitchen is a show that is produced by Down to Earth, and in which it's a show that celebrates the link between nature, nutrition, and livelihood, as the tagline goes. And in that, we talk about local and seasonal foods, which are not only good for us, but also good for the environment. These are maybe some of the foods that would be available in the times of climate change, when nothing else is easily available. So the menu that we have curated is very no, I remember it. Okay. So the menu is very special, and in which we have tried to bring to you whatever we have talked about in the Green Kitchen. So we have had 3 seasons of the Green Kitchen. The first season was mostly about tree-borne foods, and that included foods like kathal, which is huge, which has got really huge and large fruits which can sustain a large family for maybe a week. So that is something that one should depend on. We also talked about multi-purpose trees such as the moringa tree. We have a raita prepared out of moringa leaves this time. And that is, again, you can have its leaves, you can have its fruits, you can also have its flowers. So it's a multi-purpose tree. We have recipes using things like amla, which can grow very easily in arid areas. And specifically, this is very interesting because it's high in nutrition. Nutrition everyone wants, because the less you eat and you get the sufficient nutrition, that's good for the body. So we have a rasam that has been prepared with amla and also with turmeric rhizomes. We have talked about things like rice varieties from across the country. We had a very special season of Green Kitchen in which we invited Professor Pushpesh Pant to talk about rice varieties from across the country. And we have things like a salad prepared out of matta rice from Kerala, which we have mixed with lemon from West Bengal, which is the Gondhora. Again, it's a mixture of things which is very interesting and brings out very interesting taste. And we have things like millets. We have prepared a sweet out of bajra, which is prepared with gur. It's called bajra ki tikki, and it's served with gur, which has been prepared without using any chemicals. So that is, yes. So I can go on and on and on, but I think
you've given us the taste of what we are going to eat. So please, lunch is served. And Shuparna, what time do we come back? What time do we come back, Sukanya? 2:45. 2:45. I think 3 karlo, because it's a big lunch. Okay. We come back here.